The parachute tampering mystery. On July 4, 2003, the skydiving community in Hibbleston, England, gathered for what should have been a routine competition weekend. Among them was Stephen Hilder, a 20-year-old British Army cadet and experienced skydiver with over 200 jumps in his logbook. Friends described him as meticulous about safety, always checking his equipment thoroughly. That afternoon, Hilder boarded a plane for a planned jump from 13,000 feet. He was participating in the National Collegiate Parachute Championships, an event he had been preparing for weeks. Video footage showed him smiling and joking with teammates before the flight. He appeared completely at ease, giving no indication that anything was wrong. At the designated altitude, Hilder exited the aircraft. For the first few seconds, everything seemed normal as he entered freefall. Then came the moment to deploy his main parachute. He pulled the ripcord, but nothing happened. The main canopy failed to open. Witnesses watching from below saw him struggling in midair. In such situations, skydivers are trained to cut away the malfunctioning main chute and deploy their reserve. Hilder followed this procedure exactly, but when he activated his reserve parachute, it too failed to open properly. He was now plummeting toward the earth at terminal velocity with no functioning canopy. The impact was devastating. Hilder struck the ground at nearly 120 miles per hour. Death was instantaneous. His body left a crater in the field where he landed. Fellow skydivers rushed to the scene, but there was nothing they could do. What transformed this tragedy into a mystery was the post-mortem examination of his equipment. Investigators discovered that both his main and reserve parachute straps had been deliberately cut almost through, ensuring they would snap under pressure. This wasn't an equipment failure, it was sabotage. Police launched a murder investigation that spanned months. They considered every possibility from rivals to enemies to suicide. DNA evidence, fingerprints, and extensive interviews failed to provide definitive answers. 3 years later, a coroner returned an open verdict. To this day, no one knows for certain who cut Stephen Hilder's parachute straps, or why. The first fatal leap. On July 24, 1837, a crowd of thousands gathered at Vauxhall Gardens in London to witness what was promised to be a revolutionary advancement in the science of parachuting. Robert Cocking, a 61-year-old watercolor artist with no practical experience in aeronautics, had designed what he believed was an improved parachute. Unlike the dome-shaped designs of the day, Cocking created an inverted cone made of canvas stretched over a rigid frame. His design was based on theoretical calculations rather than practical testing. Despite warnings from professional balloonists about the weight and instability of his 223-pound apparatus, Cocking was determined to demonstrate his invention. The Royal Nassau balloon was secured to carry him aloft, with Cocking and his contraption suspended below it. As dusk approached, the balloon rose slowly into the air. Spectators pointed upward, following its ascent. At approximately 2,000 feet, Cocking gave the signal to release his parachute from the balloon. The moment of separation was met with cheers from below. That enthusiasm quickly turned to horror. Almost immediately, the heavy inverted cone began to oscillate violently. The rigid frame, unable to withstand the air pressure, collapsed inward. The canvas tore apart as the structure inverted itself. What remained was no longer a functioning parachute, but a chaotic tangle of canvas and wooden rods. Cocking fell straight down, no longer descending but plummeting. Witnesses later described the sickening acceleration of his fall. Some turned away, unable to watch. Others stood transfixed by the tragedy unfolding above them. He dropped like a stone, his failed invention offering no resistance to gravity. When Cocking struck the ground in a field in Lee, southeast London, the impact was catastrophic. His body was crushed beyond recognition. Those who reached him first found only broken remains where moments before had been a living man. The invention that was supposed to secure his fame had instead claimed his life. Robert Cocking became the first recorded fatality in parachuting history, his death witnessed by the very crowd he had hoped would celebrate his genius. The fraud. On August 6, 2016, at the Lodi Parachute Center in California, 18-year-old Tyler Turner prepared for his first ever skydiving experience. It was meant to be a celebration of his recent high school graduation. His mother watched from the ground as he suited up. Turner was paired with Yong Kwan, a 25-year-old trainee instructor who was himself learning the ropes of tandem jumps. Both men were strapped to an experienced instructor named Robert Pooley. What none of them knew was that Pooley's certification wasn't legitimate. He had falsified his credentials using someone else's digital signature to bypass the required 500 jumps needed for tandem certification. He had completed fewer than half that number. The plane climbed 13,000 feet. Turner, excited but nervous, posted a final social media update before takeoff. "We're going skydiving!" At the jump altitude, Pooley, Turner, and Kwan moved to the door. They leaped into the clear blue sky above the California farmland below. The freefall began normally. Wind rushed past them as they reached terminal velocity. But when it came time to deploy the main parachute, something went catastrophically wrong. The chute failed to open properly, immediately twisting and tangling. Pooley struggled to correct the malfunction as they continued falling. In such situations, the reserve parachute should save lives. Pooley activated it, but either through improper packing or deployment error, the reserve also failed to inflate correctly. All three men remained in essentially a freefall. Witnesses on the ground watched in horror as the three bodies plummeted without the mushroom-shaped canopy that should have been above them. They struck an adjacent vineyard at full speed. The impact killed all three instantly. Turner and Kwan's bodies were found still strapped to Pooley. Investigation revealed that Pooley had been performing tandem jumps for months without proper certification. The parachute center had failed to verify his credentials. Tyler Turner had signed a liability waiver before his jump, not knowing that the man responsible for his safety was fundamentally unqualified. The tandem jump that was supposed to be an exhilarating coming-of-age experience became instead his last moments on Earth. Broadcast interrupted. On September 25, 1983, viewers across Philadelphia knew Jim O'Brien as the charismatic weatherman who had been a fixture on WPVI TV for nearly a decade. At 43, O'Brien was more than just a television personality. He was a licensed pilot, an adventurous spirit, and an experienced recreational skydiver with dozens of jumps in his logbook. That Sunday afternoon, O'Brien arrived at the United Parachute Club in Wilmington, Delaware. It was a perfect day for jumping. Clear skies, good visibility, and minimal wind. He had completed many jumps at this same location. There was no reason to expect this one would be different. The plane climbed to 11,000 feet. O'Brien was jumping alongside several others, including an experienced instructor. They exited the aircraft one after another. O'Brien's freefall began normally. The sensation of falling, the rush of wind, these were familiar to him. After reaching terminal velocity, he deployed his main parachute. The canopy opened properly, but almost immediately, something went wrong. Another jumper had deployed his chute too close to O'Brien. The two canopies collided and became entangled. Both men were now connected by their parachutes, spinning and twisting in the air. In this emergency situation, skydivers are trained to cut away their main parachute and deploy their reserve. O'Brien followed procedure, releasing his primary chute, but as he did so, the entanglement worsened. His reserve parachute couldn't deploy cleanly. It became caught in the lines of the other jumper's canopy. O'Brien was now falling with nothing to slow his descent. The other skydiver's partially functioning parachute wasn't enough to support both men. From the ground, horrified spectators watched as O'Brien plummeted the final 1,000 feet. The impact was fatal. Jim O'Brien struck the ground at nearly full velocity. He died instantly. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but there was nothing they could do. The other jumper landed roughly, but survived with injuries. The news of O'Brien's death spread rapidly through Philadelphia. Viewers who had welcomed him into their homes each evening were stunned. The weatherman who had reported on countless storms had been taken by a different kind of turbulence, one that proved impossible to forecast. Nitro Circus Nightmare. On September 28, 2015, crowds gathered at the Olympic Valley in Squaw Valley, California, for the opening event of a golf tournament. Among the scheduled entertainment was a skydiving demonstration by professional athletes. Eric Rohner, a 39-year-old extreme sports star known for his appearances on MTV's Nitro Circus, was part of the four-person team making the jump. Rohner had built his reputation pushing boundaries in extreme sports. He pioneered ski-base jumping, a combination of skiing and parachuting off fixed objects. With hundreds of successful jumps behind him, this demonstration was considered routine by his standard. The morning was clear, conditions ideal for the planned aerial display. At 11:15 a.m., the team exited their aircraft high above the golf course. The first three skydivers navigated perfectly to the landing zone, touching down to cheers from spectators. Rohner was the last to make his approach. His parachute had deployed correctly, and he was descending in a controlled spiral toward the target area. But something went wrong in the final moments of his descent. Winds shifted slightly, pushing Rohner off course. He drifted toward a line of tall pine trees bordering the landing zone. Witnesses watched as he tried to maneuver away from the trees, pulling his steering toggles to change direction. The correction came too late. Rohner struck a large pine at high speed. The impact was violent. His momentum carried him into the dense branches where his parachute became entangled. He was trapped approximately 25 to 30 feet above the ground, suspended by his harness and the tangled canopy. First responders rushed to the scene. They immediately began efforts to reach him, calling for ladder trucks and climbing equipment. Despite the rapid response, Rohner was inaccessible for crucial minutes. When rescuers finally reached him, they found he had suffered catastrophic internal injuries from the initial impact with the tree. Despite desperate attempts to save him, Eric Rohner was pronounced dead at the scene. His wife and two young children were not present at the event. The audience that had gathered to watch an exciting demonstration instead witnessed the death of an extreme sports icon, killed not by some spectacular stunt gone wrong, but by a seemingly routine jump that ended in tragedy. The Pedro Bonita Plunge. On November 3, 2024, the skies above Rio de Janeiro were clear, and conditions seemed perfect for flying. Jose de Alencar Lima Jr., a 42-year-old veteran paratrooper with nearly 2 decades of experience, arrived at Pedra Bonita, a dramatic cliff face rising 2,283 feet above the city. He carried specialized equipment for speed flying, a hybrid sport combining elements of paragliding and parachuting. Lima was well known in Brazilian skydiving circles. His military background and thousands of successful jumps had earned him respect as an instructor. But that morning, he bypassed the official launch ramp. Instead, he chose an unauthorized spot on uneven ground along the cliff edge. Witnesses later reported that Lima seemed rushed, spending minimal time checking wind condition. At approximately 10:30 a.m., he prepared for takeoff. He positioned himself at the edge, his speed wing partially inflated behind him. The colorful canopy fluttered in the breeze as he tensed for the running start that would carry him off the cliff. Lima began his sprint toward the edge. His first steps were confident, but the uneven terrain immediately caused problems. His right foot slipped on loose gravel. The wing, already catching air, pulled him off balance. Instead of launching cleanly into the air, he stumbled at the critical moment. Lima fell rather than flew from the cliff edge. His wing partially inflated but immediately twisted, rendering it useless as a control surface. He plummeted nearly vertically down the rock face. For the first 100 feet, his body repeatedly struck outcroppings of rock. Despite his extensive training, Lima could not regain control. His partially deployed wing actually worsened the situation, acting as a destabilizing sail rather than a controlled canopy. Tourists hiking below watched in horror as he fell approximately 820 feet. The impact at the base of the cliff was catastrophic. First responders reached him within minutes, but Lima had died instantly. The force had shattered his body. Medical examiners later confirmed that no survival would have been possible given the nature of his injuries. Park authorities noted that Lima had specifically circumvented safety protocols by using an unauthorized launch site. The established ramp, just meters away, had been designed precisely to prevent such accidents. The man who had safely guided countless students through the air had died because he had chosen to ignore the very safety rules he had taught others. Falling without a parachute. On August 13, 2022, a routine skydiving day in Nashville, Tennessee, turned catastrophic in a scenario that skydiving instructors train for but never expect to face. Justin Robert Fuller, a 35-year-old instructor from Murfreesboro with over 4,000 jumps in his logbook, prepared for a tandem jump with a first-time student. Fuller had been teaching for 7 years and was known for his methodical approach to safety. The day was clear, with light winds, perfect conditions for skydiving. Fuller and his student boarded the aircraft, ascending to 14,000 feet above the rolling Tennessee countryside. Video from inside the plane showed Fuller joking with his student, trying to ease the newcomer's nerves before the jump. At the designated altitude, Fuller and his student moved toward the open door. They exited the aircraft in the standard tandem position, Fuller at the back with his student harnessed to his front. The freefall began normally. Wind rushed past them at 120 miles per hour as they accelerated toward terminal velocity. About 30 seconds into the descent, something went catastrophically wrong. For reasons investigators still cannot fully explain, the harness connecting Fuller to his student failed. The metal clips that should have securely attached the two men together somehow disconnected. In an instant, they were separated. The student, suddenly alone in free fall, panicked. By either reflex or accident, he pulled the ripcord of the emergency parachute. The canopy deployed, immediately slowing his descent, but Fuller continued to fall, now completely separate and, crucially, without a parachute of his own. Tandem instructors do not wear individual parachutes. Their entire system is built around the shared harness. When that failed, Fuller had nothing to deploy. Ground observers watched in horror as the student floated safely under a fully inflated canopy, while Fuller plummeted past him. Fuller fell approximately 13,000 feet without any means to slow his descent. He struck the ground in a rural area near the drop zone. The impact was instantly fatal. First responders found his body in a field, the earth around him cratered by the force of his landing. The student landed safely a quarter-mile away, physically unharmed but psychologically traumatized by watching his instructor fall to his death. The incident sent shockwaves through the skydiving community, raising fundamental questions about the reliability of equipment trusted with human lives. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.